Good afternoon, distinguished participants. Let me begin first of all by thanking the organizers for my presence here and participation, which actually has been made possible through the good offices of the Institute of Diplomacy and Foreign Relations, Malaysia. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have really been exposed to all the necessary measures and steps that need to be taken to further strengthen this India-ASEAN partnership. And I don't need to go into detail. They were already elaborated yesterday and also in today's panel and also by Minister Sharma. But what is important, I think, is for us to perhaps recall the drivers of this cooperation. Why is it occurring at this stage, and why is this momentum building? So I would like to offer my own strategic perspective on this India-ASEAN strategic partnership and the factors that I think are very important in sort of moving forward and keeping in mind why we need to strengthen India's role in ASEAN and in Southeast Asia. First of all, I would say that the geopolitical dynamics do play a very important role. And as we are aware, let me go to the first part. These strategic dynamics are clearly driven by considerations such as the increasing pace of globalization. That is very, very important. And also the whole concept of ASEAN centrality. As you can see, all the major powers have actually bought into this concept of ASEAN centrality. And I think that is so important because ASEAN does not threaten anyone. And that has made it very comfortable for every external power to sort of contribute to this regional process and to find space within which they can engage themselves very positively. So as India is rising, we can see that even India is having the space and the opportunity to contribute to regional integration and development led by ASEAN. Now, over the past years, we have seen the political, security and economic dimensions within which ASEAN is developing. But we also have to keep in mind that there are other major powers which are also of concern to India as India increases its engagement. And quite these other powers are the United States and, of course, China. And China's increasing role in this region is clearly providing strong incentives for India to engage itself in Southeast Asia, given the fact that Asia has always been energized and influenced by these two major civilizations, China and India. Now you can see ASEAN right in between 10,000 years of civilization. On the one hand, India, on the other side, China, both impacting on Southeast Asia, and this process has been going on. What we see is the re-emergence of India under new circumstances. Circumstances provided, as correctly pointed out, by the end of the Cold War and increasing interdependence. So what we also see is the mutual empowerment that is going on. As ASEAN is empowering itself, and as India empowers itself, it is creating the necessary convergence, the strategic convergence for mutual empowerment. Hence, we have this India-ASEAN strategic partnership. As you can see, our region is also at the conjunction of the interests of all major powers, especially United States, China, of course, India, Japan, and Russia. All these are major players, and the ASEAN approach has been very inclusive, and this is also the reason why we find that it is very easy for us to work with all major powers. ASEAN is a very inclusive region, and it's important to remind us that it is the ASEAN process that is facilitating this regional security picture, that is producing this kind of development and prosperity and security in which all actors can participate. ASEAN focuses on cooperative security. So when we sort of emphasize cooperative security, we are basically saying that no major power is a threat to ASEAN. So we welcome the engagement of all major powers. And this has made possible India's increased participation. India actually loves ASEAN centrality, because as long as ASEAN is the driver, ASEAN is the mover, ASEAN is the facilitator, ASEAN is the moderator, there is room for everyone to engage, without these external powers themselves conflicting with each other in our region. I think that's the whole concept of ASEAN centrality, to manage the involvement and engagement of all the major powers in the region in a cooperative manner, and as far as possible to reduce conflict. I think this is clearly the scenario in which we need to see the growth of the ASEAN-India partnership. More specifically, let us look at areas of non-traditional security and how this vision statement needs to be implemented. It is my view that it is incumbent on all ASEAN members to view and practice security in a holistic and comprehensive manner. That is at the national, regional and international levels. There is a great need, of course, to balance hard security with soft security and hard power with soft power. And I think there is enough wisdom that India, as well as the other civilizations and ASEAN, can bring to the table to use this historical wisdom in which we have always managed the engagement of all powers in the region in a way of stability, growth, peace and prosperity. We also need to remind ourselves, when we look at the whole world, one of the most successful regions in developing regional integration and in developing regional cooperation is ASEAN. This is a clear fact of international politics. So the reason is, why is it ASEAN is able to do? ASEAN is not doing it alone. ASEAN is doing it always in cooperation with external powers. And this is the wealth that has been brought together into the region, and it is this wealth that must be maintained and continued in the future. It is really making very positive use of globalization and respect for diversity. The strategic management of diversity is another skill that this region possesses. And it's the same diversity we can also learn from the Indian experience. India, as you know, is a multinational nation. But somehow within that democratic framework, even if it is cumbersome, it is able to move on and provide a model of how democratic development can take place peacefully in the context of diversity. This is what we need to learn, especially the role of religion. To me, I think is very important. Religion, as you know, is increasingly being securitized in some parts of our region, and religion is something that has to be handled very carefully. It can be a powerful instrument of peace and progress and security and mutual understanding, provided it is handled properly. But if it is mishandled, if religion is politicized, we have always noticed throughout the world and in our recent history everywhere, it can quickly turn into a very ugly instrument, triggering violence, conflict, and war. So this is something we can learn about the strategic management of diversity, giving religion its proper role and importance in the politics of the country, but without allowing religion to be politicized or politics to be religionized. Either way, it is dangerous. Now, in terms of specific areas of cooperation, we know that the ADMM process is working very well. India is an active participant. And it is this ADMM plus process which also keeps the region in a very secure and stable manner. Because security cooperation is very important, it also means that we are able to harmonize realism with constructivism, constructivism with realism, taking into account that the nation state will always be there. The nation state cannot be wished away under globalization. It is the best handle that we have despite its limitations, but ASEAN clearly has shown that we can work the nation state and we can get the nation state to cooperate with our own neighbors within ASEAN in a constructive way and also engage the external powers in ways that are mutually beneficial. And here we can see it in the ADMM+. Now the EAS, of course, is an emerging regional architecture. The EAS is still a very loose organization, but I suppose it still has to be that way. ASEAN has never really believed in tight institutionalism. Tight institutionalism requires very high levels of commitment and obligations and binding agreements and legal procedures. If we go into that, we will find that it is very difficult to operate ASEAN in the way we are able to operate. Here is where I've always argued that ASEAN regionalism is process regionalism. It is a process which gradually produces the product. And once that product is produced, it begins another process. So if we look at ASEAN regionalism as process-oriented, we will see much more results than we would see if we look at it as product-oriented, which I think is very much a Western notion of looking at regionalism. But it cannot be applied to Southeast Asia because we do ASEAN for ASEAN. We do not do ASEAN regionalism to please others or to please outsiders. And I think this is our regional confidence that has enabled ASEAN to be the central interlocutor with external powers even in times of challenge. So the EAS, I think, is a good broader framework for discussion and dialogue, and ASEAN, together with India and all the other powers, are engaged in this process, and it is yet another institutional mechanism by which we try to reduce tension and promote regional security. Now, let me also add this ASEAN-style regionalism strengthens both the Track 1 and Track 2 processes. You see, we can do ZOFAN while we also continue to have bilateral and multilateral alliances. You might see it as a contradiction in terms, but it is possible. In other words, you can promote neutralism while you also take care of national and regional security by security cooperation and security alliances with external powers. So there is a hybrid there, and it is not really textbook international relations, but it is the way of operating and managing a given reality. So we marry constructivism with realism in ways that I think textbook scholars will find it very difficult to understand. But in ASEAN, we also learn to coexist with contradictions. We learn to manage contradictions. And in this way, you see, we find that this process regionalism also has enabled to develop an ideology of moderation. I think moderation is really our strength, and the way ASEAN harmonizes all these differences enables moderation to emerge. And because we practice moderation in our region, all external powers are so comfortable with us in terms of engaging us in ways that also promote their interests. So let me give you the secret of ASEAN regionalism. As I see, this is what ASEAN is all about, and this is what has made possible the strengthening of ASEAN's engagement with India and also with other external powers. ASEAN believes in informality. It believes in loose arrangements. It places reliance on personal relations. It has a preference for gradualism and incrementalism, decision-making by consensus, sovereign equality of member states, and avoidance of confrontational diplomacy, and dialogue to manage conflict. I think these principles have actually held us in good stead over the last 40 years of ASEAN, and I don't see why they will not help us in the future. This is the very basis by which ASEAN has developed and evolved as a regional institution, and it will also be the terms of reference by which external powers, including India, engage us. Let me conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by quickly saying that ASEAN give space to both established powers as well as emerging powers. Now, ASEAN and India can be viewed as emerging powers with capability to shape the regional balance as well as the global balance in military, political, economic, diplomatic, and strategic formulations. This capability is also measured in terms of the relative rise and decline of the principal actors in the international system. As you know, the Pax Americana is clearly declining. So the vacuum created by the Pax Americana is being filled essentially by the rising powers of China and India, and also by the collective power of ASEAN. Even Japan now is re-engaging itself. So you can see how strategic space is being filled. And I'm also of the view that power abhors a vacuum. So whenever there is a vacuum, power quickly moves to fill it in. And India is having that space to fill any power vacuum that is emerging within the region. And this is welcomed also by all the other ASEAN members and also by the external actors. The United States is particularly comfortable with India playing a larger security role in the region as its own power declines in the region. So there is clearly an element of balancing also the rise of China, and it is this strategic context in which the India-ASEAN strategic partnership is developing. So in Asia we see there are four principal actors: USA, China, India, and ASEAN. And this India-ASEAN partnership endorses the ASEAN way of promoting regionalism and Asian integration. That is, India recognizes the regional entity as a principal actor in Asia. And this elevation of the ASEAN-India strategic partnership, from dialogue relations to strategic partnership level now, is clearly also to serve notice that India wants to be an active player in the new Asia, and India has acquired the strategic vision, capacity, and resources to contribute effectively to the region's development, security, and prosperity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.